Greetings, I'm the Political Ferret. Let's talk about words and definition for a change. My native language is German, as you might have figured out. German does not only have absurd long words, we also have quite a lot of synonyms, even for those absurd long words, which then pile up to a buttload of vocabulary. But do not fear, you don't have to understand this punch-in-the-face language to get my point. It's just that we have to deal with this topic quite a lot over here. So, synonyms. I guess we can all agree that in regions with a lot of mountains, there are a lot of words for snow, because snow can be very different, and fishermen next to the sea may have a lot of words for fish. And someone living in a desert won't have words for either of those. Normally, we use different words for some things that are more or less similar, but still have distinct features, like snow and fish. But sometimes, and those are the very interesting ones, we use different words for more or less the same things if this thing is one time understood as something that's good and sometimes not. So let's start with a story. Once upon a time, a kid had a batshit crazy father, and that wasn't the fault of the kid. It wasn't even the fault of the father, because he was just clinical sick. What I mean with sick in this case is that this father suffered from delusions. So what are delusions? In a nutshell, we all have inner logic, and in most cases this inner logic is shaped to a more or less large degree on the external logic. We learn as a child that things fall down, so our inner logic will always tell us that things will drop down, not sideways. But people suffer from delusions, are different. They have an inner logic that supersedes external logic. Well, that makes it pretty hard to argue with them, to say the least, but that's because they know that what we see as logic is the real delusion. So, however, this father had a bunch of kids, and his delusion circled around the idea that there is a magic rat, and this rat is responsible for more or less anything that's going on in the world. More than this, he himself sees the rat, and the rat is talking to him. And one day, one of his daughters said out loud that there is no magic rat, because she can't see it. And the father answered with his fists. More than that, he did beat up all his kids. After some time, the kids did start to see the magic rat. And because the whole family saw it now, the next generation didn't even need the beating anymore. The social pressure of the family and the wide approval of this idea is more than enough to twist future minds. So this is one way to get an induced delusional disorder. Now, let's think one moment about the difference between that and, let's say, religion. Well, there isn't much, is there? There are some tries to resolve that, like saying that religious people can differentiate between the real world and their beliefs. And, well, I doubt that whoever wrote this had a lot of talking with true believers. But this was just a short way to show why we use different words to more or less exact the same things, because one of those things is accepted and the other is not. Because God has credibility, while Harvey the Magic Runnybad does not. So what's the difference between fascism and collectivism? Well, fascism tells one group, say consisting of 100 people, but with some kind of group identity, that they are better than 100 individuals. That a group of 100 people has to have more rights and weight than 100 people with no group. Meaning in the end, if you subtract the 100 people, that the group has rights too. Activists about 100 years in the past took the example of the fascio, a bundle of rods. You can break one, but you can't break the bundle, they say. So then you add a name to that, call it a movement, and ta-da! You have power over people. In 1919, the word and the analogy was widespread in Italy, and mostly by the left. Collectivism says the same thing. It tells us that groups have rights, that a group of 100 people has to have more weight than 100 people without a group. Group rights. But since the left defines itself as collectivist, But anti-fascist, they had to come up with different definitions. Or, to be true, they just use different labels. It's a bit like if you're loving pizza, but being anti-pizza. What do? You give your pizza a different name. Point out that you use cheddar, therefore it's not a pizza, because the evil pizzaists use Gouda, or something like that. But for someone who is more into sushi, it's the same thing, because basically it's the same thing. It's a delusion to see their big difference. They think that individuals and individualists are just another enemy collective. It's same in the exact same way as for someone who has only a superficial idea of snow. Because he won't care about the 10 different words these crazy guys up in the mountain have for this puffy cold stuff. Is there a difference between collectivism and fascism? Yes, sure. But there's also a difference between Atlantic seawater and Pacific seawater, because the Atlantic seawater has a bit more salt in it, but the difference is ridiculously small. But in comparison with freshwater, sorry, it's the same. So if we compare collectivism and fascism to a free open society, we see how close these two things are. And that's the crunch. Those who insist of telling us how big the difference between collectivism and fascism is don't accept a free society of very loosely linked individuals, where only people have rights, but groups doesn't. Not even as an alternative. They are so deep indoctrinated into thinking in groups, thinking in collective, thinking in castes, skin colors, social layers. They don't see that a group with 0 people inside of it should and can never ever hold more rights than a single human being. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful day.